Good morning. I'm Helen Christians, and I will be your MC this morning. I'd like to welcome you to the Sunday morning meeting of the Humanists of Greater Portland. The Humanists of Greater Portland is a chapter of the American Humanist Association, and as humanists, our members believe in a progressive philosophy that without supernaturalism advocates living an ethical life based on science, reason, and free inquiry. And today's presentation on the Oregon Cultural Trust and its unique role in supporting and strengthening Oregon's arts and heritage and humanities community addresses the humanist commitment of global awareness. HGP is an all-volunteer group. I mean 100% all volunteer. That's pretty rare. That believes strongly in freedom of speech. But I'd like to welcome Jeff Strand, who has graciously volunteered to do our reading this morning. Come on in, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I thought I'd read something from the program of the Homowa Festival from 2002. Homowa is a harvest festival among the Ga people of Ghana, and we had a big one here for 15 years until 2004, I think was the last one. And this is the kind of thing that the Cultural Trust funds. The Homoa Festival originated among the Ga people of Ghana in West Africa. The Ga people have a tradition of welcoming strangers, and that is displayed in a variety of ways. In their daily lives, Ga families prepare extra food at meal times for guests who might arrive unannounced. The values of hospitality, tolerance, and reconciliation are strong in the Ga society, and for good reason. A small ethnic group surrounded by powerful neighbors, the Ga increased their number by giving sanctuary to groups of immigrants from other ethnic groups in need of a place to live. The Ga people, who were once immigrants to Ghana themselves, allowed people to join their society without requiring them to abandon their religion and other customs. Instead, newcomers blended their ways with those of the Ga people. This process still continues today. The capital of Ghana, the city of Accra, is the home of the Ga as well as people from many other areas within Ghana. The constant assimilation of the foreign people and ideas has made Ga society diverse and cosmopolitan. Even without outside influences, Ga society would still be diverse. Today, Ga people live in 7 towns along the Ghanaian coast. Each of these towns owns a belt of agricultural territory that stretches north from the ocean to the Aquapim Mountains. Town people own land in the countryside while villagers have their places in the city. The Ga are farmers, fishermen, and urban dwellers. They move between both worlds, but they are rooted in the countryside, as reflected in the saying, if you say you are a Ga and you don't have a village, then you are not a proper Ga. Sometimes we think of traditional African societies as having a single way of life that is not in contact with foreign influences. Some do, but others do not. Sometimes we think that foreign influences dilute or destroy tradition. Sometimes they do, but sometimes new ideas strengthen a culture. For the Ga, tradition is as much about meeting the challenges of the future as it is about preserving the past. Long ago, the Ga faced the problem of building unity from diversity and found a solution: tolerance, reconciliation, and respect for everyone. That is the meaning of Homoa.
Our speaker today will be taking questions during his presentation. It's my pleasure to introduce Brian Rogers. Brian is the Executive Director of the Oregon Arts Commission and the Oregon Cultural Trust. Brian is a longtime arts and culture consultant who has led planning and facilitated retreats with a focus on funding stabilization and grant programs for several state art agencies and multiple cultural organizations across the country. He served as Deputy Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts for 20 years. He is also an artist and holds a master's in fine arts from the Graduate School of Art at the University of Arizona. Welcome, Brian, and thanks so much for your presentation today.
Great, great. I'm going to share my screen, folks, and Again, thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate it. Fascinating. I spent some time on your website the other day looking at some of the past presentations. Quite a wonderful program that you have, and very impressive. And I'm glad that you're doing it. So, give you a little background on the Oregon Cultural Trust. We were founded about 19 and a half years ago, and we're going to celebrate our 20th year in the next calendar year. We are a state agency, and we're housed in Business, Oregon, along with our sister agency, the Oregon Arts Commission. The Oregon Arts Commission has been around since 1965, and the Cultural Trust, like I said, was founded almost 20 years ago by the Oregon legislature. And it was a big movement to, create a cultural trust to help support culture across the state because Oregonians value, supporting and recognizing all different kinds of culture that occurs across the state. And so our mission is really to lead Oregon in cultivating, growing, and valuing culture as an integral part of our communities. We do a fair amount of grant making, and we have two main programs. Well, actually three. I'll talk about the first two. The Cultural Development Program, in which we fund nonprofit cultural organizations uh, to conduct arts, history, heritage, preservation, and humanity efforts. In fact, your organization is, I'm almost certain, eligible to apply to us should you want to do a project in the future. And hopefully the GA Festival. I just love that. Thank you for sharing that story. They would be eligible too, I believe, to apply to the Cultural Development Program. We also have a relationship with every county and tribal coalition across the state. So every county and tribe receives a block grant from the Cultural Trust, which is then disseminated in their service area in the form of local project grants. So annually, there are on average about 450 local grants that are made across the state. So our reach is in every corner of the state. And we also have a statewide cultural partnership with the Oregon Arts Commission, Oregon Humanities, the Historical Society, the Cultural Heritage Commission, and the State Historic Preservation Office. Again, each one of these organizations receives funding to help them support programming statewide, and some of them actually do funding programs to support specific, historical arts or heritage preservation activities that occur. We also provide programs and services. We have an organizational and professional development program that works with organizations to help build capacity and also the leaders of those organizations for them to, learn more about how to run an effective organization. We also support the state's poet laureate, and this year it's Anis Mojani. Actually, he's going to serve for 3 years. The past poet laureate was Kim Stafford, and we've had over 20 poet laureates through the years. And we actually partner with Oregon Humanities to administer the program, which is funded by the Cultural Trust. And Anis Mojani, if you haven't had him on your meeting here, I would recommend that you consider having Anis present and give his thoughts about being a poet. He also does spoken word. He's won national awards for his writing and presentations. Just an amazing person. We also have a unique cultural state tax credit, which I'll talk more about in a few minutes. But basically, there are over 1,400 eligible cultural organizations in the state. And you, as an Oregonian, can make a matching donation to the Cultural Trust if you donate to one of those cultural organizations and receive that money back on your state taxes as a 100% state tax credit. I just want to give you an example of one of the projects that the Trust has funded, just to kind of give you a sense of the work that we do. So 11 years in the making, the Chetco Indian Memorial was completed in late October 2020 with the installation of a bronze sculpture of Chetco Native American elder Lucy Dick, and it was made by artist Vincent Talbot. Previous stages of the interpretive site at the Port of Brookings included building a plank house, installing interpretive signage, and planting native vegetation. The memorial honors Chetco Native people, the earliest known inhabitants of the Chetco River Valley. And the project has been supported by several cultural development grants from the Cultural Trust over the years. And one thing I really want to highlight is that the Cultural Trust last summer received $25.7 million through the CARES Act via the Oregon legislature. And we were able to fund over 621 cultural organizations across the state. And again, we work with our cultural coalitions and tribes to get the funding out. And as you can imagine, the biggest expense that people brought forward was business expenses and venue reopening, transition services, and durable goods and services like PPE. I think it was Sue talking earlier before the meeting started about traveling in the state. And while accommodations was the hardest hit initially from the pandemic, we found that cultural organizations were one of the first and was the second hardest hit. But the impact for cultural organizations continues and will continue on even longer. So the sector, for all intents and purposes, is the hardest hit sector in the country. So a museum, the Portland Art Museum, for example, I think it's over 70,000 square feet. A couple weeks ago, they could only have 50 people in the building, including staff. And, the shopping mall was fully open and had, hundreds of people. So I think, the cultural organizations are really trying to find a way to reopen responsibly and within the state's guidance. And we are working very closely to see if we can allocate some more funding to help organizations receive support and capacity building. So the 25.7 million was only roughly half of the total amount that people requested from us. So we were around $50 million in requests. The other important thing I want to highlight at the time of receiving these funds, the total package coming from the Oregon legislature was $50 million, and 25.7 flowed through the Cultural Trust. The other half of that money was direct line items to organizations. So the total package of $50 million was at that time the largest amount allocated by any other state for culture. The next state was Massachusetts at 21 million, then Ohio at 20, and then Indiana at 10, and then several states with amounts under 10. So I think it's a testament to how much Oregonians recognize the value of supporting culture. Talk about our cultural tax credit for a little bit. So we like to kind of call it our secret weapon to protect and fund culture across the state. So we can count on funding from the Oregon Cultural Trust every year, as well as a permanent fund. And we have a permanent fund that we've been building over the 19 years that is around $33 million, which we then use the interest earnings to put into our grant making program. And the amount of funding distributed depends on how many Oregonians choose to earmark a portion of their state taxes for culture. So it doesn't mean paying more in state taxes. It means choosing what your state tax dollars fund. Basically, you're asking the Oregon legislature to take a portion of your taxes and fund culture. So we like to ask three basic questions. Would you like a greater portion of your Oregon tax fund to go to culture activities? And I think your answer would probably be yes. The next question is, did you or will you give to one or more of the Oregon nonprofit cultural organizations, or will you in 2021? This should say 21, sorry about that. And we have a broad interpretation of cultural organizations. The organization for which you're a member is eligible. Arts organizations, library, museum, public radio, OPB, for example. If you're a member of OPB, that's an eligible amount. So I'm pretty sure that most of you would say yes to that question. And then finally, would you be willing to donate to the Cultural Trust before the end of the calendar year, knowing that you'll get that money back as a 100% state tax credit on your 2021 state taxes? And hopefully your answer to that would be yes. So basically, you keep track of your donations to cultural organizations, and by the end of the year, you could send a check or credit card, or just call us up or donate online. And on your state tax credit form, or on your state tax form, enter the amount you gave to the Oregon Cultural Trust. And I'm sure many of you have seen, if you use TurboTax, for example, that there's several state taxes in Oregon. And if you click on the cultural trust, it'll ask you for the amount, and then the refund coming back to you will increase by that amount. There are limitations. $500 for a person, an individual filer. Couples filing jointly is 1,000. C-class corporations, it's up to 2,500. And I'm not going to read all these, but there's a fairly robust, frequently asked questions on our website. And if you don't find a question there that you want to ask, you'd certainly give us a call or email us, and we'll help you out. And our website also has a lot of additional resources. There's a short, I think it's a minute or so video about how the trust works. You can sign up for our newsletters and reminders. I think it's a great thing to do. We like to send out a lot of information about the different kinds of projects that are occurring across the state, and in general, just learn more about the Cultural Trust. So,
Brian, I have a question. So if you give, I'm going to, let's just say I give to an organization, Portland Center Stage. I make a donation to Portland Center Stage. I don't quite understand how it works that I've given to the Oregon Cultural Trust, or am I all goofed up with that as far as how the tax credit goes?
So yes, if you gave to the Portland Center Stage, let's just throw out a number, $100.
$100. Okay.
And then you gave $100 to the Oregon Cultural Trust. The Oregon Cultural Trust $100 is a 100% state tax credit. So you would get that money back on your state taxes.
Mm-hmm.
The money you gave to Portland Center Stage, that $100, is a deduction.
Right.
So you can deduct that on your taxes if you're itemizing.
Yes.
And so basically, your initial out-of-pocket expense is $200 total.
Mm-hmm.
But with your deduction and your tax credit, your out-of-pocket expense might be, $70.
Right. Right. Oh, that
So
makes sense. Okay.
yeah,
So you have to, so the key is up to $500 you can give to the Oregon Trust per person, or $1,000 per family, and get that money back.
correct. Yes.
Wow.
So last year, and this is kind of counterintuitive, but in calendar year 2020,
Mm-hmm.
it was the biggest year ever for the Cultural Trust. We raised $5.2 million, which is over $600,000 more than we ever had in a single year. And we had over 11,000 people donate to the Cultural Trust. I think people really missed being able to attend in-person cultural events, and recognize that the Cultural Trust was poised and ready to help support cultural organizations, recover, reopen, reorganize, and be available again to the public. So we're pretty excited that we'll be able to really increase our grant making programs in this calendar year.
I have a comment here from Ingrid. Hang on, I'm going to read it. Johns Hopkins University, the nonprofit arts, entertainment, and recreation sector, lost 35% of its jobs due to economic losses through the first year of the pandemic. A survey from the American Alliance of Museums found that over 40% of respondents reported lost income over the past year. So I think she's just recognizing that how much the cultural enterprises suffered.
And right, yeah, a lot of earned revenue. Cultural organizations have a lot of earned revenue for providing programming, or the ticket sales, and then rental. Like, just think of the rental halls that are run by nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
The Portland Art Museum gala season. Every one of their gala spaces is completely booked in typical years,
Mhm.
pretty solidly. Would not the bottom fell out of that too.
Yeah. Well, even weddings. I mean, they host
Weddings.
weddings and yes, quite grand. I mean, really, just uh, Dave DiNucci has a question. He's going to come on live. Come on in, Dave.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I heard, or so you said that even people donating to organizations like ours might qualify somehow for getting this or this fully refundable tax credit. Um, um, I suppose we would have to qualify somehow to be on a list that would allow that to happen. What kind of steps would be involved there?
It's pretty easy. We have a very, very short form on our website to qualify, and I could send you a link later on to do that. And you submit that, we review it, and in this case, we probably just qualify you. It seems um, very much eligible to me.
What kind of organizations do get qualified, Brian? I mean, um,
Oh my.
I'm in a medical education group that it's a nonprofit, 100% nonprofit, volunteer run, and it's wound care education that we offer in the Pacific Northwest. Is that something that could qualify, even though it's very specific to the medical community, I would say, and to students,
Right.
doctors, nurses, therapists, education.
Yeah, we really try to, like, our interpretation of culture would be arts, heritage, historic preservation,
Yeah.
humanities. So the kind of organizations we that are qualified are, historical sites, all the historical sites across the state.
Mhm.
Four Rivers Cultural Center in Ontario, and Wash to Shore down in Bandon, the Shakespeare Festival in Ashland, those kinds of organizations, all different sizes and um, different kind of programming.
Okay.
And like the Santiam Lodge is
Yes.
also a historic site in the
Yes.
Oregon Chateau and Caves. So there's quite a number of buildings as well that are managed um, by organizations.
And HGP would qualify because we do cult. I mean, we're a cultural organization,
Mhm.
historic, and yeah, it's the community. I've got it. That makes sense. That makes sense. Ingrid has put into the chat your website, so folks will be able to
Okay.
look at the website and know that. Do you think? I mean, it's. I've been worried about. I'm a the play. I love plays, and so the Portland Playhouse over in North Portland
Mhm.
and Portland Center Stage and Repertoire. I've been happy, thrilled that they haven't just shut down. I just don't know how they're surviving. Do you think the Oregon Cultural Trust is that lifeline for these organizations?
Some of the, after we got done doing the relief funding in the last summer, the $25.7 million program, we had excuse me, overwhelming response from organizations saying it basically saved them.
Yeah.
The Camelot Theater in Roseburg was almost everything around it was burnt to the ground.
Yes.
So they had a double whammy,
Yeah.
and they wrote a very heartfelt letter saying that it helped them survive, and they're now looking forward to re-engaging with the community.
It's wonderful. I mean, we have such a rich theater, surprisingly rich theater here in Oregon. I'm just thrilled that we have this. And I was so sure that things were just going to have to end. I mean, how do you keep your staff going and things, even though, I mean, even just if you can just pay their health insurance and a, stipend of some sort. But thank you. Um, could you talk a little bit about the poet laureate and how he works in the state and how he might be a possible speaker for us someday?
Yeah, the poet laureate position was created, I think, back in the 70s, and we've been managing it uh, since then and funding it. And the program is administered by the Oregon Humanities.
Mhm.
And on our website, at the menu bar, there's a selection for the poet laureate. And it's basically a program to help support poetry and presentations and to engage people through spoken word or written word.
Mhm.
And Anise has done a number of presentations online. In fact, I just had him come to our Oregon Cultural Trust board meeting last Thursday and make a presentation. But he's very socially conscious, and as well as being very very much about the moment as well.
Mhm.
So it's a program that if you wanted to have him present, it's something that we would fund. We
Okay.
would fund his time to help to make him available.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay, that's lovely. So we have a comment from Dave DiNucci. We used to have a subgroup, our HGP, our group
Mhm.
used to have a subgroup club called the Culture Vultures, who would get together regularly for cultural events. Maybe after COVID pulls back, this might happen even more. So
Mm.
we're a gang that really does enjoy culture. Okay, I have a comment from Dell. How do folks in Washington State take advantage of the Oregon Cultural Trust?
It's funny. We do get out-of-state donations. I think people who've moved from the state and remember and recognize what the Cultural Trust does still donate to us, but they're not eligible to deduct that or
The
claim it
tax,
on their
the tax
if,
credit. Okay.
unless they're filing um, Oregon taxes. Some
Hmm.
folks have dual residence.
Right. Uh, Dave has noticed license plates in Oregon marked as cultural trust. How does this contribute to your fund?
Yeah, thanks for that. The license plate, we receive funding from that. Everything you pay in registration comes to us minus the $2.50 for ODOT to administer it. And we use that money to promote and market the Cultural Trust. And it's funny you should mention that. For our 20th anniversary next calendar year, we're going to release a brand new license plate. And we're um, pretty close to the end of developing that. And we also have a partnership with a private company to install murals at all the
Oh,
airports in the state, and probably a banner on the Northwest Film Center.
mhm.
It's really exciting. It's a license plate that has the kind of the typical landscape, but really vibrant Oregon landscape. But embedded it in the image are over 120 cultural symbols from all the different cultures in Oregon. So there's the famous black rodeo rider, and the Fisher baskets, etc. So it's really really beautiful. I think you're really going to want one.
I will look forward to seeing it. Um, Ingrid had a comment that the current poet laureate, and I'm going to ask you to, it's Anna's, what's the last name? Our current poet,
Anise
Anis
Mojani.
Mojani. Anis Mojani, Governor Kate Brown named her or him?
Him. Yeah.
Him, poet laureate in April 27th, 2020. And he's the 10th poet laureate in the state of Oregon.
Mhm.
Uh, from Sue, could you give an example of how money is given to the tribal coalition in Oregon?
Oh, sure.
Mhm.
So the Grand Ron tribe, for example, they recently renovated an old school into this really amazing cultural center and museum. And the gymnasium has been converted into a gathering space for creative people. And the museum is absolutely beautiful. And they also, the Grand Ron tribe also bought the Willamette Falls paper mills, the old defunct paper mills, and are in the process of working with the heritage group there in Oregon City to
Yeah.
convert that mill site into a public space, so you could walk right up to the falls, and that there'll be a cultural center there that interprets the Native American story. So it's going to be an amazing project for Oregon City. It'll really put them on the map. And so we fund the Grand Ron tribe to do projects in their tribal community to support elders or tradition keepers to pass on certain like bead making or whatever the case may be, and even foods and language, to make sure that the tribe can support those activities.
Wow. I didn't know that that project was still a go down at Oregon City.
Yeah, it's still very viable. The Willamette Falls
Yeah.
group is working on that and the tribe, they were able to come up with the funding to buy the property
Yes. Yeah.
because that was such an important place for many Native peoples over thousands of years.
Interesting. It's a beautiful spot. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful, but you can't really get there. You can't get there right now. It's all closed off
Well,
because of the plans.
I went on the private tour.
You
It's
did.
breathtaking. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
breathtaking.
Yeah. You can see it from the bridge, but you can't
Hmm.
get there. You can
Yeah,
get close. You can get close, but you can't get there. Wow, that is wonderful. And so
yeah,
you're part of that happening. You're part of the Oregon City renovation of the plant.
yeah. We're very much in support and are working with them, and they're currently in a fundraising phase and figuring out how to tell the story in a respectful manner because so many different people have been there over the thousands of years that they want to make sure that it's told from their voice and their
Yes.
perspective.
Wow, that's lovely. I mean, to take that plant is, I'm sure, I shouldn't say I'm sure, possibly polluted that river, and now to clean it up, and it's just a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Joyce has a question. Where is the first tribal museum that you mentioned? I think in your presentation, or is it the same one as the one you're mentioning in Oregon City? I
Well,
think it
they're
was.
different.
Yeah,
The
they're different. Go ahead.
the Checo
Yeah,
one
the Checo.
is in Brookings, the Port of
Brookings.
Brookings,
Mhm.
and then the Grand Ron Cultural Center is I think if you Google it, it's right in Grand Ron. It's a little
By
tricky to get to. You have to kind of look around for it.
Is it by the casino?
No,
No. Okay.
no, it's a couple miles away.
Okay. Okay.
It's actually on the reservation. And then the other one, Temascallic, the Umatilla tribe,
You were telling.
behind the casino. That one is pretty amazing too. It's beautiful. It tells the story of the earliest Native Americans through and up to the Oregon Trail and beyond.
Now, I'm. Where is that one located? I don't know where the Umatilla Casino is.
It's Pendleton.
Pendleton. Okay.
Pendleton. It's a little outside the town of Pendleton.
These are all things I had. I don't. I know I had no idea they existed. I can't. This is such a rich, places to visit this summer. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Dell had a question. Did the Grand Rod tribe get the whole building facility that by the falls? Did they get everything?
Yeah, there's a couple mills down there. I think in the day there was 3 or 4 mills,
Yeah.
and they're all just skeletons now, of course.
Hmm.
Um, but they bought the whole tract of land from the falls down to Main Street or whatever it is in Oregon City.
Yeah.
I think they bought it for $8 million. And there's a lot of uh, construction and reclamation that has to go on to get the
Course.
site back.
Mhm.
And they're trying to rebuild some of the natural. There's a creek actually that runs down underneath the mill. So when they remove that, they want to make it a natural area.
Polly commented she took a boat there once, but it doesn't run anymore. There used to be I think a boat ride that went there. Where they're talking about getting it back again though. We had a presentation maybe last year that they're hoping to get a boat. I mean a commuter boat that goes from Vancouver all the way down to Oregon City, and that would be another way to travel.
I would also. It sounds like a lot of people are very interested in the Native American
Hmm.
story here. I think
Yes. Oh, very much so.
Are you aware of the Confluence Project?
No.
Okay, so the Confluence Project is about the history, living cultures, and ecology of the Columbia River system
Hmm.
through the indigenous voices. And it's a nonprofit, and they have 6 art landscapes and educational programming. It's pretty amazing, and public gatherings. And the artist that was selected, and they worked with all the tribes in the geographic region, from Idaho, Washington, and Oregon to select the artist. It was Maya Lin, did the Vietnam Memorial in
Yes.
DC.
Hmm.
So they have all the sites done except for Celilo Falls, and
Oh,
there's a little bit of hurdle they have to get over. But the project at Celilo Falls will be Maya has designed in the kind of like the fishing platform
mhm.
that will recognize the amount of fishing that occurred at the falls that were covered up by the dam.
Yes.
So I would recommend, and I can send this to you as well, to have Colin Fogarty, the director of Confluence Project,
Confluence.
Confluence, meet with your group. He's
Hmm.
just a wealth of information and knowledge about the Native American story, and I think you might find him extremely interesting.
And that was Colin Fogarty? Was
Yeah,
it? Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think yeah, we are very interested in that. Okay. Dave says a week or two ago, the demise, presentation we had, we um, we heard about the demise of the Oregon College of Arts and Crafts. It came up. Does the Cultural Trust help fund organizations like this? Are there efforts to fund schools like Oregon College of Arts and Crafts, or uh, replace that school? That was such a wonderful school. I took a couple classes up there just for the public
yeah,
and loved it. And yet it's gone.
yeah. It was very, very sad to see it go. We have been a funder of that organization for years,
Yeah.
and like anything, it's a nonprofit has many, many slices of
Yes.
revenue that build up their budget, and
Mhm.
not one funder could save it, but um, I do hope it comes back in some form or another. And the collection that they had went to PNCA, which we also fund PNCA for their
Okay.
exhibition series,
Mhm.
um, and it was really sad to see the Children's Museum
Oh,
close
yes.
its
That was
doors.
horrid.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, is it gone or is it just, I mean, who owns the building now?
Um, I think the building might be owned by the city. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But yes, it's gone, and all of their exhibits have gone to other children's museums across the country.
Oh,
But
it's,
because the children's museum sector, across the country, they've been hit harder and harder than anybody else because it's such a high touch, interactive
it is.
museum
Hmm.
that
Oh, yeah.
it's really hard for them to think about how they reopen. The other big challenge the children's museum had is it's built on basically a man-made fill. It's all fill underneath the building,
Oh,
and
earthquake.
they had to get out of there anyway because the building's not anywhere near seismically safe, and there's nothing they could do with that facility because it basically will slide down the hill.
Period. Yeah.
So they were in the process of looking for a new space.
Oh, anyway. Okay. Well, and isn't this interesting? The Oregon Arts and Crafts was also a hands-on kind of a
Yeah,
build, and that these 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 heavy touch, heavy hands-on that they haven't survived. I know the College of Arts and Crafts was ended before the pandemic, but what a loss! What a real
hmm
loss for us. Now, could they come back? Is there any chance the Oregon College of Arts and Crafts could come back?
I think it could. I think
Uh-huh.
it might be interesting if they explored a partnership with PNCA
Yeah.
um, to reinvent themselves,
Hmm.
um, and get reestablished in some way.
Okay.
And a private school has bought the property, so the
Oh, okay.
property's good.
They're gone. The property's gone.
Yeah, it's different ownership now. It's a private
Okay.
school.
Okay. Is there a list of sites that the Cultural Trust supports? We'd like to know about these places in order to visit them.
Yeah, I think what we have on our website is every time we do a round of funding, we do a media release, and
Mhm.
all of the sites are kind of summarized in the media release, and I could send you links to those as well,
Good.
to look at the different kinds of projects that are occurring across the state.
That would be great, Brian. We got a
I
tough.
was,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say really quickly, it's just
Mhm.
amazing the amount of things and projects and activities that are occurring across the state. But it's a challenge to get all of that organized and information out to folks about what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and culture takes in such a wide variety, you know. Yeah. So it's complicated, but thank you for doing this work. We've got a tough question here from our famous tough questioner, Al Christians, but does the Cultural Trust ever encounter culture wars? You know, that you're funding something that people find a problem.
Oddly enough, no, not so much.
Yeah.
Um, we went to the Oregon legislature to extend the tax credit ability. So the tax credit lasts for 6 years. So every 6 years, we have to go back to the legislature, prove its worth, and then ask for it to be extended another 6 years.
Mhm.
We did that in the last biennium session, and it passed unanimously except for one vote no. And that one vote no is a representative who always votes no on any tax.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
So the case to legislative members from all over the states and from the two major political parties all voted to support culture. So we haven't, we're kind of fortunate because my colleagues, like in California, Idaho, even Washington State, for example, Colorado, there are opponents to
Yes.
culture. And a lot of their time and energy is spent defending and then building a good offense. But, our energy is more spent on, can we get more of this? Can we get more of that? And demonstrating to the legislators what we do in their communities. Some of the far eastern, Republican representatives are big fans of the Cultural Trust. We renovated a theater, and I believe it was Joseph, and the representative stopped me in the hall one day and he said, "Hey, thanks for funding that renovation." And then he started talking about, it was the place his wife, is the first date he had with his now wife,
Mhm.
and how important that was to him, and how great it was to see the theater back and all that kind of thing. So yeah.
Do you think Dale's kind of follow-up question was if and you say we're not getting these troubles with culture war, um, how is Oregon so fortunate? I mean, like you said, we're so rare to not be experiencing this. Do you think it's because you you take in the whole state, you consider the whole state of Oregon?
Yeah, and I think that's mostly through our cultural coalitions, the county coalitions, and the tribal affiliations, that we're able to fund just about every corner of the state, all different kinds of projects. So they see the funding coming to their areas, and recognize the value of that.
Mhm.
And also the other thing too is we're not asking in this case for general fund
Yes.
necessarily. We're going out and doing the work to get our own funding.
Mhm.
Now, technically, what participants of the Cultural Trust tax credit are doing is, like I said before, kind of telling state government where to put revenue, and that is to culture.
Ingrid put into chat for our members look in chat. Uh, she's a great, she just finds things so good. But the Cultural Trust awards 139 Oregon cultural organizations. So there's a link to all the organizations that you have, that you're currently funding.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Do do you do a visit? Like, are you going out? Is there a committee that goes out and says, "We've given you this money. We want to see what you've done with it"? How do they prove that they've
they've followed through with the funds.
Yeah, I mean, in normal times, it's hard to visit,
Sure. Now.
over 100 different
Yeah.
projects, and we have ongoing relationships with a lot of organizations, and we know, through paperwork that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we get the media releases and all that kind of thing, and we do like to travel around and get to see things first place. So we'll go to a region and hit several different organizations, and we often do that with our board members too. We have our board meetings in different communities
Uh-huh.
and visit a number of organizations as a group and have um, presentations made, etc. So it's a way for us to engage on a face-to-face level.
Good, good. How does someone get on your board? How do you pick your board?
There's a nomination process, or if you're interested, just let me know. We can have a conversation. It's pretty
No.
easy. The first part of it, and then we kind of have a conversation about what board service means. See if it's a right fit.
Yeah.
And then then the official nomination goes to the governor's appointment office.
Mhm.
The governor's office reviews it, and if they're okay, then it goes to the Senate, and then the Senate acts on it.
Okay, so it's there's a lot of hoops that people have to go through and to become a board member, and that
There's
yeah.
It's a state process, yeah.
Yeah. I understand.
And there's over 300 boards and commissions at the state level.
What's the proudest what is the proudest thing you've ever done for the Oregon, that you feel that it's like the proudest that you are in what you've accomplished? Is there anything when you look back over your career what's a very, very proud moment?
Well, I think getting the tax credit extended was a huge thing. There was a lot of work put into that. We actually worked with Econ Northwest, and they're the firm that does a lot of demographic and reporting. You'll see them around election time on CNN. And they're based here in Portland. We worked with them to really do a 10-year study of the impact of the cultural trust. And it was pretty amazing, and we were able to use that and like a clear presentation to the legislature to show the value. And when all that passed unanimously, that was it was a pretty big moment in the cultural trust
Yeah.
history.
How many people worked on that? I mean, that's a major accomplishment. How many people were actively involved in that presentation?
Oh, I would say
and preparing for it?
Preparing for probably about 20 or so.
20, okay.
A lot of interviews too.
What about your own art? Oh yeah, I forgot you're an artist. That's great, Dave. Are you still active? And what's your medium? What's your primary field?
A little slow right now because it's been a crazy year, with all the additional funding programs we had to put together. So days were long, etc. But oil painting, yeah, I think it's the medium that I can get the most richness and depth and feeling for.
And as an artist, how did you get into? Because you've been in Pennsylvania, you did 20 years there. What's your story?
It's pretty funny, unintentional. So I got back from graduate school to Pennsylvania, and I had a friend who worked at the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, and he was going to go on medical leave for 3 months. And he said, "Why don't you go and see if you could do this, for 3 months?" So I did, and 20 years later, my friend never came back. He stayed. He found something else to do.
Oh,
so
that's funny.
yeah.
Oh.
But once I sort of got into the mix, as it were, of working and helping support artists and individuals, and learning a lot about Pennsylvania, because it's diverse differently than Oregon. So there's not one recognized tribe in Pennsylvania. So the Native American community is, pretty much not visible, right? The Lenape. But you have a big Amish population.
Yes.
Yeah, Hmong, Cambodian, and then you start to look at the ethnic groups like German, Pennsylvania German, and Deutsch actually, and Irish, Italian neighborhoods. So it's in Puerto Rican. I worked very closely with an organization, Taller Puerto Riqueño, and the Village of Arts and Humanities, an African American Black program in Philadelphia. And then in Pittsburgh, there's an organization that works with disadvantaged kids in public schools. Manchester Craftsman's Guild, which has actually won a couple Emmys for its jazz program. So it was like a different kind of
Very
world.
different. Yeah,
But
very different.
and when this position became available, it just really appealed to me just to learn new things and interact in different ways.
So you came to Oregon for this job?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. It was a big national search.
Congratulations. I'm glad we
Thanks.
got you.
Well, it's been 7 years.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned, Oregon has such a dark racial history. Do you ever see a museum or a cultural entity in Oregon looking at our history, like a Black, American history, something that looks at it with a Black focus?
Yeah, there's an organization called Oregon Black Pioneers out of Salem, and they do an amazing job. They put together an exhibit with Oregon Historical Society
Mhm.
about examining Black lives, Vanport, kind of perspective,
Mhm.
and Albana neighborhood, and really kind of told it from the stories from people from that period of time. And then they modified the exhibit when it traveled to the University of Oregon and retold it with a Eugene focus. So one of my past board members, Libby Tower, her dad was one of Oregon's premier architects, and they just recently changed the School of Architecture building to his name,
Oh,
Tower, and Unthank Tower is actually.
uh-huh.
Um, so the Oregon Black Pioneers, I think, is really out there trying to tell that story in a really, really thoughtful manner. And then, the August Wilson Red Door Project, speaking of theater,
Yeah.
Kevin and Latrevin Green, with his All Hands Raised theater piece. I don't know if you saw that. Yeah. And who else? Yeah, I think those are the ones that popped to mind right away.
Sure. But
Yeah.
there is funding for this, but there's no, it's an exhibit more than it is a building or a place.
Right. And there's a lot of organizations, big organizations, like you think about the lineup of exhibits that were at the Portland Art Museum,
Mhm.
like Hank
Yes.
Thomas Willis, and then
There's some
Robert
great ones.
Colescott,
Mhm.
telling the story of African American growing
Yeah.
up, and so.
Yeah, those were excellent. I saw those they were wonderful. A quick question. Speaking of jazz and music, Portland has an interesting jazz history. Does the Cultural Trust help businesses and/or festivals promote jazz or music or documentation of our jazz history, our music history?
Yes, absolutely. Darrell Grant, jazz musician and teacher educator, he just received in the fall. He received the Governor's Arts Awards, and the governor, through us in partnership with us, we hold the Arts Awards every other year, and Darrell received an award. We also work with the festivals to help support the festival activity. Anything that can happen in terms of supporting jazz will be there. It's a little at times it's a little tricky because a lot of the jazz occurs in bars and restaurants.
Yeah.
It's kind of the
Yes, you're
nature of
right.
how it's
But
presented.
jazz goes, yeah.
So
Brian, do you want to just go over one, just because we're getting, I think, getting close to the end of the questions. you want to go over just one more time how we would make a donation to the Oregon Cultural Trust, just so everybody's very clear in everyone's mind how to do it?
Sure.
Yeah, I
Sure.
think I personally would like that, because I want to make sure we do it correctly. My husband does the taxes, but I'm going to double check that it gets done for 2021.
So let's say you become a member of OPB, or you
Okay.
probably are now,
Mhm.
and your membership is $100 a year. And so you give them $100, and knowing that you can give $100 to the cultural trust, um, and at tax time, if you're itemizing, you claim the $100 that you gave to OPB,
Mhm.
and then you claim the state tax credit for the Oregon Cultural Trust, $100. So you'll get back the $100 on your taxes as a refund,
Mhm.
and the donation that you made to the OPB would be a deduction. So
If
your total out-of-pocket expenses would be $200 at first, but then when you do your taxes with the state tax credit and the deduction, your out-of-pocket expenses might be $70.
if I didn't give a dime to any cultural event or cultural program, but I only gave to the Oregon Cultural Trust, is that allowed to just give to the Oregon, or do you have to give to the cultural funds as well?
Yeah, the concept is really, is envisioned as encouraging Oregonians to support cultural organizations
Mhm.
and the cultural trust because we
Okay.
created the tax credit. You could donate to us without donating to a nonprofit,
Anyone else? Okay.
but technically it's not eligible for the tax credit.
Ah, got it. So you really need to have line up your any
Mhm.
donations to cultural organizations, and I take it that's
Mhm.
a pretty broad, uh,
Yeah,
yeah. And then if you gave $1,000 to cultural organizations, you could give $1,000 to you and get the $1,000 tax credit plus the deduction from if you itemize.
correct.
Yeah.
And I don't know if any of you have looked at Willamette Weekly's Give Guide, which
Hmm.
comes out in the fall. The Give
Hmm.
Guide, their website, they kind of select organizations, nonprofits in different sectors. So you'll have health and wellness, you'll have animals, and environment, education, and arts and culture. So if you click on the arts and culture area and donate to cultural organizations, when you finish that, you'll get a pop-up and say, "Hey, did you know that you're eligible for the Oregon Cultural Trust tax credit?" So you can kind of do some donations through the Give Guide, and it prompts you right along the way. It's kind of neat. And we've been getting a lot of younger donors that way who test the tax credit. They'll give us $10, and then
Oh,
they'll see that it works, and then in the next year it's $200,
yeah.
in 3 years, and 4.
They
So,
test it out.
and we have a really high degree of donor retention. Once somebody does it, it's like, oh, this really does work.
Yeah.
And we've had donors donating the full 19 years that the Cultural Trust has been around. So
Thank you, Brian. I'm picking up a couple more questions if you can hang out a little
sure.
longer. Is the trust involved with the Frank Lloyd Wright structures in Pennsylvania? I think he's referring to when you worked in Pennsylvania. Is the trust involved with the Frank Lloyd Wright structures in Pennsylvania?
Not the Oregon Cultural Trust, but
Hmm.
the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts funded Falling Water. They had a nonprofit group.
Hmm.
They did a major renovation. I don't know if you saw this old house.
Yeah.
They did a whole season on Falling Water, and that was pretty amazing. But it's a beautiful. If you ever get the chance, if you're in Western Pennsylvania, to go out to Falling Water, I would recommend it. I've been a number of times. It's just every time it's magical. And then the Gordon House, right? The Gordon House in Oregon, down at the Oregon Gardens.
I've been there.
Been there, yeah.
Mhm.
It's a really nice example of Lloyd Wright's work. We funded them a couple times over the years for different activities,
Okay,
some
wonderful.
preservation activity.
Good. There's a question. We see some paintings on the wall behind you. Are they yours?
No, those are actually part of a collection of mine that I have. Some different artists.
Let's see. Let's see. Is anybody? Our chat's a little goofed up. I'm getting a note from Dave so if I missed any questions, folks, and you want to come on live, please do so. I think we're getting pretty close to the end of our questions, though. Ken?
I have a question.
Yes, Del. Go ahead.
If the artist has a piece that's accepted for display, can the artist then turn around and sell copies of that art?
That has to be an agreement with the artist and the exhibiting site. So typically with nonprofits, it's pretty open. That, you know, if an artist has an exhibit at a museum, there's no obligation usually that the artist has to work through the museum to sell the work. The opposite is true with for-profit galleries. So a for-profit gallery, basically you would work on a contract. The artist would work on contract with the gallery to manage the sale of all artwork. So it would have to go through the gallery.
Thank you. Any other questions? You covered it very well, Brian. This was fun, and I've learned about so many really great places that I want to visit this summer. That within an afternoon's drive. You know, I mean, that's lovely. I just want to sincerely thank you.